let's talk about how you came about the original idea. Did you have a business plan when you first started?
Laurel, I went to business school, of course. That was the one thing I knew how to do. I had a very detailed business plan.
Oh, okay. But, I mean, the first step after the business plan was, I mean, you talked to me about advisors. So was that the first step you made?
It was. You know, I think a really important message to communicate to the audience is how important advisors are in building a successful business. So I saw the market opportunity, and actually the first thing I did before I wrote the business plan is I called a great friend of mine who runs an internet company, and I ran it by him. And he said, you know what, this is a fantastic idea.
Don't you love that?
I know, validation right away.
Validation,
yeah, it's really important, I think, also, you know, to affirm each other as entrepreneurs. You know, it's a lonely road, but and so he said, why don't you make a business plan? And then I called my other friend who is a great technical guy, and he said, okay, once you've done the business plan and you feel comfortable with it, we're going to start out with wireframes, and I'm going to explain to you how the technology works. And he met with me once a week, and we went through wireframing, we went through the technology stack, how coding works, how the site architecture. I mean, I literally had used the internet, but I didn't understand. I didn't know how it was made, and now, I mean, I'm having pretty detailed technical conversations with our programmers every single day.
Wow, that's amazing. So before this, tell the audience a little bit about what was your training and background in technology?
Nothing. I had no background. You know, obviously I was an avid user of the internet. I would say I'm a little bit older than a digital native, but, you know, have used it since college. And I think I have a good design eye. My mother's an artist, so I think that's an important thing to know. But I just think if you're going to start an internet company as a non-technical founder, you just have to ask questions.
All right, well, we're going to get into the non-technical stuff in a minute or two, but
so I had no background.
Let's talk a little bit more about the advisors and what they brought to the table. So they brought knowledge.
They brought knowledge.
Okay.
They brought a roadmap of how I was going to execute.
Okay, that's really helpful.
Yeah, and did they build it for you, or were they more of a sounding board?
No, they were a sounding board, but they just laid out the steps. Them. I really, really trusted them.
Are there times when we shouldn't trust our advisors?
I think there are. I mean, one thing I'd love to ask is, were these formal advisors and you said, okay, you're going to give me X number of hours a month, or were they just people that you respected that said, I'm happy to talk to you, and there's no structure around this whatsoever?
Initially, there was no structure, and they are just good friends of mine who said, I'm willing to pay it forward. People helped me when I started my business.
That's awesome.
That's really amazing.
That is really amazing.
Most people don't ask for that kind of help, and when they do ask, they don't actually take the help. So did you actually sit down and take hours of these people's time?
Hours of their time.
Oh my God, didn't you feel terrible doing that?
Yes, I did.
But you got over it, and that's the important part.
You know what? And what's great is another friend of mine just called me last week, and he said, I'm starting a startup. I don't know. What should I do? And I said, well, it's so important to have advisors, and I'll help you. This is what you need to do. And I'm starting down the road with him. And again, you know, I'm only 18 months into this, but I've learned so much. And, you know, I just gave him his bank, and I told him how to set up the bank. I told him how to set up advisor shares. I told him how much he should pay the first developer. And those are all those questions that these guys helped me with last year.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's so important.
So when I first had advisors, I made some mistakes. And there are mistakes to be made, so we should probably go into some of those. One of the mistakes I made was I didn't clarify how much time I was going to take from people. Even though I made a list of I did something good, which was I made a list of assignments that the advisor was going to do for me. But then I forgot to follow up with him. So months later, he had fallen off the radar. I was busy working. And then years later, when I sold the company, or I was about to sell the company, he had this advisory shares. Yeah. And I said, D, because I'm not going to give his name, but D, can you give back those shares? You never earned them. And he was a friend. And he said, no. And when I sold the company, he made $70,000 off those shares that he didn't earn. Wow. So I think this is a lesson to all of you out there. If you're going to get advisors, definitely have it in writing up front what they're going to do. And have the shares vest over time. And if at any point they're not working for you, cut them off.
I couldn't agree more. And I think make it very clear the difference between getting advice and being an advisor, because you also have a lot of people that are going around saying, oh, I advise this company and I advise that company, and people are on 17 different boards when they're really not. Like, there is a really big difference between giving advice as a friend or paying it forward and then having something really structured where there's a financial commitment.
So what do you think is fair to ask, Jennifer, like per month or per week from an advisory board? You're giving, let's say, the amount that we usually give is what, 0.25% of the company to 1% of the company?
That's right. Okay. And it usually vests over somewhere between 2 and 4 years. And
Right.
I like to think of it either on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis. So say that you're putting like 4 hours a month, or you're putting 12 hours to 16 hours a quarter. You know, some months you're going to be more. That's the way it's going to be. And some months it's going to be less. And, you know, it's not like you're keeping a time journal with every one of them, but at the same time, you still should keep in the back of your mind, are they really pulling their weight?
Right, and at a certain point, do you go to your lawyer and say, they're not pulling their weight, let's end the agreement now?
Yeah, I mean, you can put basic terms in them, too, which basically say, you know, you can be terminated on 30 days notice by either party.
Yeah, I think you should always have termination. Do you have any of this stuff built into your contract?
We have all of that. Yeah, I was really
great.
lucky because I had a great lawyer to start out with. So we did 0.25 for people giving a certain amount of time, 0.5. But the way I found it that it works is it's actually certain advisors advise on certain things. So I have a technical advisor, I have fundraising advisors. And so in a fundraising process, I mean, those guys may give 20 hours over 3 weeks.
Yep.
Right.
And then I may not
nothing
talk
for
to
2
them.
years.
Exactly.
Right.
In
Totally.
that case,
And that's totally
is it
fine.
fair to give them a finder's fee? I did that too.
There's a whole different legal set of rules around that, around finder's fees and whether you're registered as a broker-dealer. So my short answer to the audience is no, ask your lawyer, make sure you're doing it right. But just because you're putting a time commitment in the agreement doesn't mean it has to be like very linear and it's going to be that way the whole time. It averages out, and that's what you want to see. If it's 20 hours one quarter, you don't talk to them for another few, you know, that's totally fine.
And it's really on you as the entrepreneur to engage them.
Yes.
I mean, I think any of my advisors are so willing to engage, and it's really on me to use them. The other thing I would say is what happened with my early advisors. So we were all friends, very close friends. The 3 guys that helped me, they all knew each other. When the relationship became, I would like to communicate externally that you are an advisor to Loose Cubes, that's when we formalize it with a stock agreement.
And I think that's a good time to do it. It really
That's great.
is.
This is great advice.